We're in chapter 4, somewhere in the middle of chapter 4. Chapter Aleph, we're introduced to the three people, Tzaddik, Rasha, and Beinani. And we didn't quite find out what the Beinani is, but we started to talk about it. That's what we did. Chapter Bet, also in the end of chapter Aleph, we were discussing the fact that we have a godly soul and an animal soul, the two souls that works together. In chapter Bet, we discussed the godly soul. And we said that it's part of God. And we said how it transcended through the four worlds, Atzilus, Bria, Yetzir, Asiya, Chochma, Bina, and Dat. It went through the things, how all Jews have the same root, but they don't manifest in the same way. Just like the body has a brain and it has nails. Both come from the same drop, but they don't have the same capabilities.
Does Adam have one soul or two souls?
Good question. Adam has two souls, but not exactly like us. It's another discussion about the evolution of the Jewish nation that happened with Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and later happened again in Matan Torah. So it was not exactly like us, but someday we're going to get into that also. In chapter Gimel, we discussed Chabad, the intellect, and how intellect gives birth to emotions. And we discussed that if a person wants to be a servant of God or a good Jew, it cannot come in a vacuum. Because in a vacuum, you have the animal soul that always thinks about itself. The animal soul doesn't think about God. In order to love God and have awe of God, you need to understand God. Once you understand God, the understanding of God through Chochma, Bina, and Dat, the three stages that we discussed, are going to give birth to love and awe of God. But it cannot come down in a vacuum. If you wake up one day, according to this so far, and you feel a love or an awe of God, it didn't come according to what we learned so far from the godly soul. It is part of the animal soul. The animal soul makes you think that you love God.
Is awe and love, because for me they're very different things.
Awe and love
Awe and love.
are opposites.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awe and love are opposites. That's what we were in the third chapter. Last time, we started to talk about the three garments: thought, speech, and action. And since we're talking about the godly soul, we're going to talk about the three garments of the godly soul, which it means thought, speech, and action in Torah and mitzvahs. Not thought and speech and action of the animal soul, which we all know what it is. Thought, speech, and action in mundane, everyday life. And last time, we started a discussion, which we didn't explore so much, but the discussion was like this. There's two levels, it looks like, in a Jew. It's who the Jew is. You can ask a Jew, who are you? And the question of who I am, I'm somebody who constantly thinks about God. Or I am somebody who constantly loves God. Or I am somebody who has awe of God. That is who I am. Look at Rabbi Akiva. You ask, why is Rabbi Akiva greater than me? Because Rabbi Akiva thinks about God more than I think about God. Rabbi Akiva loves God more than I love God. So if you ask a person, who is a Jew, what makes a Jew, you will get the answer. It is intellect and his emotions. How much does he think about God? And what kind of a relationship, an emotional relationship he has with God. That's what it looks like. And all of a sudden, we said that there are three garments, thought, speech, and action. And we said that these three garments of thought, speech, and action, they're only garments. When we say garments, what do we mean? It's not you. It's not who you are. It's a garment. You get dressed in it, and then you get undressed. In our case, the garments are mitzvahs. A person puts on tefillin. We gave the example of a person who goes in Tel Aviv and eats pork while somebody else is putting tefillin on him. If you ask that person, who are you thinking about? So he's not thinking about God. He doesn't have love of God. He doesn't have awe of God. He's just there. He's giving him his arm for 2 minutes because his friend is there putting on tefillin with him. That's the example we gave. And nevertheless, he tells us over here, this is where we were last time, Vehine shlosha levushim elo, those 3 garments. We are, by the way, on page Chet, page 15, on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines from the bottom, where there's a period. Page 15, 6 lines from the bottom, when there's a period. In the English, it's page 14, the last paragraph. In the English, it's page 14, the last paragraph. Vehine, and it says, and behold, shlosha levushim elo, those 3 garments. We're going to put the example of a person putting on tefillin. Mehatorah u'mitzvotea, from the Torah and commandments, af shenikraim levushim lanefesh, even though they're only called garments of the soul, ruach ve'neshama, im kol ze nevertheless, gavha ve'gadla ma'alatam, their advantage is higher and bigger. How much higher and bigger? Le'en ketz v'sof, infinitely higher and bigger. So a Jew who has no emotional connection to God, who has no intellectual connection to God, but does the mitzvah, he's more connected to God than Rabbi Akiva and Moshe Rabbeinu up on Mount Sinai. That's what it says. A Jew. We're not talking about the time they do commandments. We're talking about the time that he was up on Mount Sinai. Yeah? At that time, the mitzvah of the Jew that just puts on commandments is higher than the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu as it is learning Torah from God on Mount Sinai. That's what it says. Right? And this is what we, by the way, it sounds strange, but if you think about it a little bit, you see that this is the difference between Judaism and every other religion. See, in every other religion, Christianity, Buddhist, you're supposed to subjugate your intellect and emotions to God. That's the main part of the religion. Even in Buddhism, in Christianity, subjugate your intellect and emotions to God. All of a sudden comes Judaism, and Judaism is the only religion that has to do with physical acts. Take a cow and put it on your hand. That's what it tells you to do. Take a cow and put it on your doorpost. Yeah, that's what it is. Take some cow, some ink, write it on top of the parchment and put it on the doorpost. It's a physical. And this is what we're going to try to understand. This is what Judaism is. Judaism is all about the commandment itself. And this is one of the things that Christianity complains about Judaism constantly. They tell them, you guys are mechanical. You measure the lulav, if it's this feet. Who cares? It's the emotion part that's important. It's the intellectual connection to God that's what's important. You think God really cares if it's 3 feet or 3.5 feet? Over here it tells you the connection when you have to a lulav or to the tefillin. Forget the emotions. Forget the intellectual part. The connection you do when you are doing the mitzvah of tefillin is infinitely higher than anything else you could ever do. It's a true connection to God. That's what Judaism is all about. And we're going to get to it later on in the thing. But just to give you the hint, that it sounds strange when you put it in that perspective that he puts it. But if you notice, this is all about Judaism. כמו שכתוב בזוהר, it says, how do I know this? It says it in the Zohar. What does the Zohar says? It says, Deoraita vekutshabrichu kulo chad. It says that God and the Torah is one thing. In other words, when you do a mitzvah, God's commandment, you become, the word mitzvah in Hebrew comes from the Lashon tzavta v'chibur, to become united, to become one. The word mitzvah means to unite with. Tzavta v'chibur. So the word mitzvah, when you do a mitzvah, you unite, you become one with God. More than what? More than the neshama could ever get one with God. There is no neshama on the face of the earth that can get to become one with God as much as a Jew who does a mitzvah. It is impossible. I don't care how much he emotes. I don't care how much he intellectualizes. I don't care whether he's in this world. I don't care whether he's in the next world. So right now, the angels or the neshamas in heaven cannot have a connection with God like a Jew down here on earth can have a connection to God when he does a mitzvah. It's a full unity with God, the mitzvah. While in heaven, we're going to see later on that it's not.
In heaven, I believe it's a different connection.
It's a lesser connection.
I don't know.
That's what we're going to learn today. We're going to learn this today. Let's wait until he tells us.
This one I'm indifferent.
Let's see what it is. Pirush, deoraita, because the Torah, היא חוכמתו ורצונו של הקדוש ברוך הוא. It is God's will and God's wisdom. והקדוש ברוך הוא בכבודו ובעוצמה, כול אחד. And like we learned before, that God and his will and his wisdom, his intellect is all one. Like we learned before, כי הוא היודע והוא המדע וכולו. Just like we learned before, that God and his intellect are one, looked like we are one, and we are on page 17, כמו שכתוב לעיל בשם הרמב"ם. Like we learned before, in the name of the Rambam. So now he's going to ask a question about his statement right now. He just told us that God and his intellect are one.
Rabbi,
Yes.
so if we really think about it, we were saying that all the sfirot,
Mhm.
right? So we're lowering in kedusha and shekhinah, and what he's saying here is actually we're more connecting with Hashem in the least kedusha possible because we're so far away, and yet we're connecting with Hashem even more than if you're in a higher sphere.
Very good. Very good, that's what we say. Excellent. And now he's going to ask a question. I know, but again, see, this is Judaism. Judaism, think about it. We're going to have a couple of chapters about this. But that's exactly what we're saying. It's very controversial. You're right. The question, but right now, before we address your question, which is going to come much later on.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Is this just a universal Jewish thought or a Chabad?
No, it's universal. Yeah. So the question right now, it says, hold on 1 second. You open up the Gemaras, you open up the Mishnahs, your question. It says, there's no way to connect to God. What do you mean connection to God? God is infinite. There's no way that a finite being through a finite thing can connect to the infinity of God. So that's his next question. And this is what he says. Ve'af de'akadosh baruch hu nikra ein sof. And as we know, even though God is called infinite, what kind of infinite God is? Ve'legdulato ein cheker. Such an infinite that you can't even investigate him. There's no science of God. There's no experiment. There's nothing you can say. There's no theory. If you said a theory about God, by definition, it's not God. Because God is above anything which is intellectual. A human being can intellectualize anyway. Velate, and it says in the Zohar, late machshavat fesa beklal. It is impossible to grasp God through thought. There's no way to grasp godliness. Not only God himself, his will or his wisdom, also you will never grasp. V'chen bertzono v'chochmato, you will never gonna grasp his will. You're never gonna grasp his wisdom. How do we know this? It's verses in the Torah. Kedechtiv, like it's written, en cheker letvunato. It says you can't investigate his intelligence. Uchtiv, and it's written in another place, hacheker elokat imtza. Can you investigate godliness? Impossible. Vechtiv, and it is written, Ki lo machshavotay machshavotechem, because my thoughts are not your thoughts. You'll never be able to grasp me. So it says, why do we say that when we're performing a commandment, we're grasping godliness? Everywhere else it says you're not grasping godliness. The sages ask this question, and the sages answer, Hine al ze amru. On this the sages answered, במקום שאתה מוצא גדולתו של הקדוש ברוך הוא, in the place that you find the greatness of God, שם אתה מוצא ענוותנותו. Over there you find his humbleness. Let's try to explain what we're talking about. Tell you a story from the Gemara. It's a strange story. The story is in the time of the Romans. There were two Roman soldiers that were probably in Sfat at the time. One or Tveria, who knows, one of those holy cities. That is the time 2,000 years ago when the Romans ruled. And there were two sages walking down the street. And these two sages were obese, enormously fat, 400 pounds probably. The two sages were very, very big. And the two Roman soldiers looked at these two sages and they laughed at them because they were so obese. And they told them, Mr. Jews, your children are not yours. What do you mean? It says you're too fat to have relationships. You cannot copulate being this big. Your children are not yours. So the two sages looked at the Roman soldiers and they told them, you should know that our wives are bigger than us. So the two Roman soldiers told them, how much more so? Now that's even more of a proof that your children are not yours. How much more so? So the two Jewish sages told them an expression in Hebrew. The expression in Hebrew goes, Ahava docheket et habasar. Love pushes away flesh. Now, let's understand what was this whole conversation. This whole conversation was a philosophical conversation between philosophers. They were discussing the merit of the Jewish God. The Romans were intellectuals, came after the Greeks, adapted the Greeks. And the Romans were saying to the Jews, God is so big, is so infinitely, and you people say that God is capable of coming down here to earth, having an offspring down here on earth. You're saying that God, the bigness, the vastness of God, can come to this physical world. It says it's impossible. God is spiritual. God is above spiritual. God, the infinite, cannot come down to the finite. So the Jews agree with them and says, we agree with you yeah, that God cannot even come down to the intellect of people. Like we said over here, we cannot even investigate. Even to the intellect, which is a refined thing in the world, God cannot down because it is very coarse compared to God. How much more so God cannot come down into the physical world itself? That's the wives, the physical worlds. We will not be able to sustain in the physical world. And the answer of the sages, he says, you're right. The infinite cannot come down into the finite. But what happened? The infinite has really no limits. That was, the infinite was able to contain all of the infinite within the finite. In other words, God can put himself into the physical world. And why did he do it? Because God loves the physical world. We don't understand why. By the way, this is one of the questions that we will have to discuss. You know this because you lived in a Jewish world your entire life. When Mashiach is going to come, what's going to happen? Yeah, what's going to happen when Mashiach is going to come? All the neshamot, all the souls that are in Gan Eden are going to come to where? They're going to be resurrection of the... Why? They're up with God. They're up enjoying godliness. Why are the neshamas going to come and get resurrected in the physical world? Because God is here in the physical world. God came down to Torah and mitzvahs. This is why the neshamas are not going to be happy being in heaven when God is going to be revealed down here on earth. The neshamas themselves are going to say, we don't want heaven. God is not here. We want to go where? We want to go back to earth, to where godliness is, to where godliness dwells, to the house of God, to the Beis Hamikdash. And you see, it's all the things that we've heard about before. As Jews, we always knew that, but we never understood it. Now, and he's discussing this all right now. With all these three words, you can see that its entire Judaism revolves around it. This is what Mashiach is. Mashiach is taking godliness and put it into this world. So this is this. But the place that you find the greatness of God is his humbleness, that he took his infinite and put it in the finest. וצמצם הקדוש ברוך הוא רצונו וחוכמתו, and God, the word צמצם in English, contracted, thank you. And God contracted his will and his wisdom בתרי"ג מצוות התורה, in the 613 commandments of the Torah, ובהלכותיהן, and in the laws. And again we have the things that everybody complains. Even religious people complains. Why are you so much into the mundane? You have to do exactly this, exactly that, exactly this, exactly that when it comes to Judaism. The matzah has to be exactly this size and you have to eat exactly that size. Because God comes down into the details, into this physical world. And it's not about your emotion. It's not about your intellect. Did you do it physically? If the matzah did not have the right measurement, you didn't do the mitzvah of matzah. You didn't unite with God. So 2 more grams connected you to God, and 2 less grams, you just ate matzah. You just ate something, but you're not connected to God. That's the craziness thing about Judaism. That's why Jews go crazy and do all kind of things. They measure things. The sukkah is this tall, is this thing, it's this wide, it's this wide. Open up the Gemara. All the Gemara is discussion. How many centimeters more or centimeters less is a sukkah? It's between 10 feet and 20 armor. What are you talking about? It's all emotion. No, it's got nothing to do with emotion and intellect. God came down into the physicality, into this physical world. Let me give you another example, because it's a controversial issue, and you're going to see it again in another example. There's a concept in Judaism that's called Makom ha'aron eino min hamidah. The place of the ark did not have place. And I'll explain what it means. God commanded the Jews in the desert to construct the tabernacle. And when he told them to construct the tabernacle, he told them to construct a room where the ark is going to dwell. It's called the Holy of Holies. And in that room that they constructed, he gave them direct measurements. And he told them, I want this room, I don't remember exactly the measurements, but I think it was 20 amma, 20 meters long, 20 amma. And he says, then he told them, I want the ark to be placed in the middle of the room. And the ark, we know the measurement was 2.5 amma. The ark was, and I want you to place it in the middle of the room in such a place that when you measure it from this side to the edge, it's going to be 10 amma. And when you measure it from this side to the other edge, it's going to be 10 amma. And when you measure the room is going to be 20 amma. And if you're not going to have the ark 2.5 amma long, this miracle is not going to happen. In other words, what caused the miracle that God was able to dwell in a place that didn't take place was the fact that the ark was 2.5 amma. This is Judaism. All of Judaism is in the Holy of Holies, in what just I described. That physicality, the 2.5 amma, has godliness in it, to such an extent that the infinite God dwells there, in this 2.5 amma. To such an extent that the 2.5 amma, if you look at it, there's no measurement to it. It is not out of space and time. It is out of godliness. The measurement of the ark is godliness. Even though it was 2.5 amma, it's both. Physicality is godliness. And this what we're going to learn. This theme is what we are going to, is what he's saying over here. And where do we find it? In the 613 commandments of the Torah. ובהלכותיהן, in all the laws. ובצירופי אותיות תנ"ך, and all the combinations of the letters of the Tanakh, ודרשותיהם, and the Gemaras, and the Midrash, שבאגדות ומדרשי חכמינו. And why did God do it? בכדי, he did it in such a manner, שכל הנשמה, that every soul, or ruach ונפש, every level of the soul, even the level of the soul that only animates the body, not just the level of the soul that has intellect, or the level of the soul that has emotion, even the level of the soul that is like a horse, it can only animate their body, שבגוף האדם תוכל להשיגם, would be able to connect to God. Now, in order to connect to God, I don't even need to be an intellectual. I don't have to have an emotional connection. I can just do an act. I can do this. And by doing this with a pair of tefillin, I'm connected to God. להשיגן בדעתה, to grasp in, if it's nefesh, ruach, or neshama, intellect, emotions, or actions, להשיגן בדעתה, to understand it, ולקיימן, and to perform, כל מה שאפשר לקיים מהם, whatever you can do from them. Not everyone can do all the commandments. For example, women cannot do some of the commandments. Israel cannot do some of the commandments that Kohanim do. A Levi can do some of the commandments that a Kohen cannot do. And so on and so forth. Yeah? Every group has commandments that they can do. במעשה, in thought, speech and action. ועל ידי זה, and through this, תתלבש בכל 10 בחינותיה בשלושה לבושים אלו. Through this, the neshama is going to get dressed in all the garments of the soul, and is going to be able, the neshama is going to be able to elevate the soul. And this is what Judaism is. The action, the mitzvah, sorry, I said it the wrong way. When a Jew does a mitzvah, a Jew is elevating his soul. He's making his soul higher than it is before. And the proof is, give you the proof. I will not explain it yet. The proof is that that's why the soul comes down. Otherwise, why is the soul coming down? There's no reason for the soul. The soul is up there with God. Why did it come down here? There's no other reason. One, we were born only to get to be, the soul wants to come down. Because by coming down and performing Torah and mitzvahs, doing the mitzvah, it's able to achieve a status it wasn't there before. In other words, the soul elevates itself by coming down. Otherwise, there's no purpose to come down. Because we know what happens down here. Most souls, you would say, what are you doing? Or when you were up there with God, you had only godliness in mind. You only had the emotional connection to God. When you came over here, you forgot about God. And we know that throughout the day, we go constantly against Him. No. True, not no. It's true what I said. But the commandments themselves, when a Jew does them, elevates the soul to a status he was higher than before. Yes?
So what you're saying is that we shouldn't really be motivated to go to the next world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And not only we shouldn't be, we're going to learn later on what he's going to say a statement about it. He's going to say it much more in a much more controversial way than you're saying it. And we're going to talk about it.
There is a place where we said that Olam Haba is the...
We will discuss it today. We will get to it today. We will get to your question today. It's the same part of his question. Yeah, the answer will answer both of yours. ולכן, and this is why נמשלה התורה למים. The analogy of the Torah is like it's water. What does it mean the Torah is like water? מה מים יורדים ממקום גבוה למקום נמוך, just like water goes down from a high place to a low place. כך התורה ירדה ממקום כבודה. The Torah, which is the intellect and will of God, came down from the levels of godliness to the place שהיא רצונו וחוכמתו יתברך, that it is the God's will and God's wisdom, and like we said, ואורייתא וקודשא בריך כול אחד, to a place where God and the Torah is only one, to such an extent you can even grasp it, ולאת מחשבה תפיסה בכלל, ומשם נסעה וירדה, and from there the Torah came down בסתר המדרגות, through סדר השתלשלוס, from one world to the next, ממדרגה למדרגה, from one step to the lowest step, בהשתלשלות העולמות, with the coming down of the worlds, עד שנתלבשה בדברים גשמיים, until God's intellect and wisdom got dressed in physical things, וענייני עולם הזה, in matters of this world, שהם רוב מצוות התורה ככולם, that this is the commandments that we do, physical commandments, והלכותיהן, and all the laws, ובצירופי אותיות גשמיות, and all the combinations of the letters, בדיו, with ink, על הספר, on the 24 Jewish holy books, שבתורה נביאים וכתובים, that is in the Torah, prophets and writings. Why? כדי שתהא כל מחשבה תפיסה בהן. So that God wanted to go dwell in the lowest of the worlds. And we will learn about it also in many places. Probably in my classes, I mentioned this. The first word of the 10 Commandments is Anochi. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I am the Lord your God. I. But the Anochi is in Egyptian. It's not a Hebrew. In Hebrew you say Ani. I am. Anochi is in Egyptian. Why was it in Egyptian? Because when God came down to the world, he says, I want to come down to the lowest of the worlds. Now, when he says down, when God says, I want to come down to the lowest world, he says, I want to come down not only to the intellectual world, not only to the emotional world, I also want to come down to the world of the animal. In other words, that if to the level of the animal in you, not just to the level of the intellect of you and to your emotional status, to the animal in you. And what is the animal in us? The animal is us, is the power to move, like a dog. A dog can run, you can move your arm this way. That's what it is. By the way, obviously you see something is messing with you. It cannot be that God wants us to be dogs, but we'll have to answer it. But that's what it says. God does want to be God can. And the word anoichi is an acronym for Ana Nafshi Katvit Yahavit. It's an acronym in Aramaic. I, my soul, wrote down and gave to you. This is what Torah and this is what Judaism is. I, Ana, Nafshi, my soul, Katvit, wrote down, Yahavit, gave over. Matan Torah is God's, gave his soul to us. Where you want to say where is God's soul? Open up the ark. Right there, in there's a Sefer Torah. That's God's soul. What does it mean? We discuss. It's controversial, said. ואפילו בחינת דיבור ומעשה. He wanted to go down even to the aspect of speech. Not only into the aspect of speech, God wanted to go down, ומעשה, even the aspect of action, of being a dog, of movement. שלמטה ממדרגת מחשבת תפיסה בהם, ומתלבשת בהם. ומאחר שהתורה ומצוותיה מלבישים כל 10 בחינות הנפש, and since the Torah and the commandments, when a person does it through the mitzvah, there's the emotional part of it, which we discussed, why do we need it later on. There's the intellectual part of it, which we will have to discuss. Do we need the emotion and intellect in Judaism? Obviously we do. But so far we don't understand why. It looks like it should be enough, just the action. Why should we have the emotional intellect? וכל תרי"ג איבריה. So when we do the mitzvah, all the aspects of the soul, the 10 attributes of the soul, gets dressed in it. מראשה ועד רגלה, from head to toe, הרי כולה צרורה בצרור החיים את השם ממש. The entire soul, when a person performs Torah and mitzvahs, is encompassed within godliness. Everything is part of God. ואור השם ממש מקיפה, and the light of God surrounds it, ומלבישה מראשה ועד רגלה, and surrounds it from head to toe. By the way, if you just do the action without the emotion and the intellect, it would surround the entire physical body, but not your emotional status and not your intellectual status. But it will still surround your entire physical body. So you can see that why you might need the intellect and emotion. כמו שכתוב, and it says, and where does it say this? It says, there's thousands of analogies of this in the Torah. Like it says, צורי יחסה בו. It says, God is my rock, I will cover myself in it. וכתיב, and it is written, כצינה רצון תיאטרנו. You get dressed in godliness, just like you get dressed in the cold. שהוא רצונו וחוכמתו יתברך. That this is God's will and God's wisdom, המלובשים בתורה ומצוותיה, that are dressed in the Torah and its commandments. And now comes the answer to your question. Both of your questions. What is the answers? ולכן אמרו, and this is why we learned, this is in Pirkei Avot. It's a famous thing, you probably heard about it. יפה שעה אחת בתשובה ומעשים טובים. It says one moment in doing tshuva and a mitzvah, and a good deed, a mitzvah. בעולם הזה, one moment of doing a mitzvah in this world is more beautiful mikol, from all חיי עולם הבא, from all the life one can find in the world to come, in heaven. For one moment of tefillin, down here, all the neshamas, all the experience from the beginning of time until now, will say we don't want all these revelations. We'll rather have one moment of putting on tefillin down here. It's worth it. Why? Because you cannot connect to God in heaven. We're going to see what are you doing in heaven. But you cannot connect to God in heaven. You can only connect to God where God chose to put himself. Where did God choose to put himself? In this physical world of Torah and mitzvahs. In a physical cow. And you take the cow and you put it in your arm and now united with God. And the poor guy, Moshe Rabbeinu in heaven right now, cannot connect to God. He doesn't have cows. There's no cows in heavens. No physical cows anyway. So what do the people up in heaven do? What is there to do over there? Ki olam haba hu, because the next world, shenehenin meziv hashchina. It's a place where people enjoy the emanation of godliness. In other words, there's got nothing of God there. They don't experience God. Let me explain what it means. See, heaven doesn't experience godliness. There's emanate. Think about God. I'm talking nonsense right here, but we're talking about God, so there's no other ways to describe it. You know how a living body radiates heat? Everything that's alive radiates heat. That's why it's alive. Yeah? God radiates heat. He's the only true living thing. He radiates heat. Yeah? Quote unquote. In heaven, they don't have any concept, any idea of what godliness is. They bask in the heat that gets off the body. The heat tells you nothing about godliness. It only tells you that there is a God. But it doesn't have any characteristic of godliness in it. It's just like physical heat over here. You don't know if it came from the sun, it came from a mouse, it came from a rat, or it came from an amoeba. There's no way to know it. But what do they have? They bask in the glory. Listen to the words where you find it. What happens in heaven? People bask in the glory of God. Not in Him. In the glory of God. By the way, it's not even the glory if you go open up the book. The books, the Gemara. You know how you go to Vegas? And Vegas have the neon signs? Right? So you find out that in heaven, you don't even see God. What do you see? In Vegas, there's a sign over there that says Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. That's the name of God. Now, does the name of God represent anything about God? No, just His name. And that Yud, K, Vav, K reflects on the floor. And the people in heaven are looking at the light on the floor, and that's what they enjoy. What's the connection to God? There's no connection. You know where God is? God is right here, in this world. Here. And from that, they have great enjoyment of trying to understand the level that they are. The Yud K Vav K that's written down in their world, they get deeper and deeper into that understanding of their world, not of God's world. ואי אפשר, but it's nevertheless, לשום נברא, to any created being, אפילו מהעליונים, even from the higher beings, מיכאל, גבריאל, משה רבינו, משה רבינו's נשמה, להשיג, to grasp, כאם איזו הארה, they only get a little bit of light מאור השם. Just like I said, you remember the light that's on the pavement from the sign from the light of God. ולכן נקרא בשם זיו השכינה. They don't get godliness. They get the ziv, the or the light of God. אבל הקדוש ברוך הוא בכבודו ובעצמו, but godliness itself, לית מחשבה תפיסה בכלל, there's no way to grasp it, unless כאם כאשר תפיסה ומתלבשת בתורה ומצוותיה, only through Torah and mitzvahs. And that's not because Torah and mitzvahs are special. They don't have a special thing. God chose to dwell within the physical world. He could have chosen to dwell in the intellectual world, but he wanted to come down into the most mundane, to the lowest of the worlds, to the physical world. אזי תפיסה בהן. Therefore, when you grasp the physical act, you grasp godliness. This is what Judaism is. Judaism is all about the graspiness, to grasp godliness. Grasping godliness is only in this physical world, and it's only through Torah and mitzvahs. So we had a discussion. The discussion was, what's higher in a person? His intellect and emotions, a person like Moshe Rabbeinu that thinks about God or intellectualizes about God all day long, like Rabbi Akiva, or like the Arizal, or a simple Jew that never thinks about God, never intellectualizes about God, doesn't have any emotions about God, but he does Torah and mitzvahs. He does the mitzvahs all the time. And over here, all of a sudden he tells us that the simple guy who does the mitzvahs all the time is more connected to God than the Rabbi Akiva or Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in the cave learning Zohar. That's what it says right here. The simple Jew that puts on tefillin, didn't think about God. Even the Jew that I said is eating the pork in our example before is more connected to God than Rabbi Akiva, than Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai learning the Zohar the first time in the cave. Huh? Yes. This is what Judaism is all about. Yes.
If there's no emotion or intellect, what does the simple Jew get out of it?
Nothing. He's connected to God. Who says he's getting anything out of it? He's one with God. What can be more than that?
But how does he know
Very good.
that he's one with God? If he's not in,
This is what the world,
he's not connected
the
emotionally or
world,
intellectually, how does he know?
the world in Hebrew is called, anybody? Olam. Olam from Lashon He'elem, hidden. Because it's the only place you can connect to God, but you can't feel it. God is hidden in it. God hid himself in the physical world to such an extent that you can be one with him and not feel it. It's very, very good. But over there, they're not connected to God. Over here, you are connected to God. You don't feel it. Over there, they're not connected to God. Over there, they feel it, but they're not connected. Over here, we connected, but we don't feel it. And what the whole Tanya is going to start doing is starting to bring these two worlds together. We're going to try to take the esoterical world of heaven and the physical world where there's a connection but no feeling, and we're going to try to take the godly soul and intellectual soul combined in one body and put them both together. That's how what the Jew is going to be, as we're going to say. I know we didn't finish the whole thing, but we're going to stop right over here. It's a good place to stop.